The ellipse tool is another one of GIMP's selection tools. It's very similar to the rectangle tool, except of course it draws an ellipse. Making selections in GIMP is really important. If you're trying to manipulate just part of an image, you're trying to copy and paste part of an image, you're trying to draw shapes, you can draw an ellipse and fill it in. There's a lot of things you can do with selections. So let's take a look at some of the options. In its default mode, the ellipse tool draws one ellipse, and if you draw a second ellipse, it abandons the first one and just leaves you with the new one. If you switch to additive mode, it will add whatever new ellipse you've drawn to your existing selection, so you can make a more complex shape. In subtractive mode, it will subtract the ellipse you're drawing from the current selection. And in the overlap mode, it will retain that which is just part of the selection and part of the new ellipse you're drawing. So those are different ways to draw more complex shapes. Going down the list, we've got anti-aliasing. This helps smooth out the curves in the ellipse. I'm actually not entirely sure why you wouldn't want that selected, but there's probably a reason. But for the most part, I would just leave it selected. The feather edge tool, this allows you to make the line between what is selected and what is not selected a little fuzzier, or feathered, as they call it. So if you were to set it here, this is pretty moderate amount of feathering. We draw an ellipse, and then we fill it in, and you'll see that it is not have the hard edge that this ellipse has, but it's got a much softer edge. That's the amount of feathering. Then we've got expand from center. This is pretty self-explanatory. It draws out from the center. You can also toggle this on by pressing the Shift key once you've started to draw your ellipse, or I'm sorry, rather the Command key. You can use the fixed option. This gives you a few options. If it's in fixed aspect ratio, it will draw the ellipse in a fixed aspect ratio, in this case 1:1, which is a circle. You can change that to other things like 1:2. That would give you an ellipse that is twice as tall as it is wide. And then there are other options. There's fixed width. This will set your ellipse so you can control how tall it is, but it will always be the same width. And fixed size in general, which will always draw the same size ellipse. Once you've drawn your ellipse, you can fine-tune it with the position. This will allow you to move it 1 pixel at a time around on the canvas. And the size, which will allow you to grow and shrink your selection 1 pixel at a time as well. The highlight option just helps you see your selection a little bit clearer, and the guide helps you get a better sense of how things are arranged within your selection. Finally, the auto shrink. This feature is kind of interesting. Works some of the time, not all the time. Basically, if you were to draw an ellipse and you were to press auto shrink, what it does is it tries to find the objects that are within this current selection and shrink to fit them. So in this case, it shrinks to fit this one ellipse. Now, if you were to turn on the shrink merged option, this allows you to do this across multiple layers. So I've got a couple other layers here. Turn these on. You can see this red layer. And so now, if I draw a selection and I click the auto shrink, it will try to select all of the objects. But if I turn this off and I'm currently on the layer that only has this red object and I hit auto shrink, it will only select that object. Those are the basic features of the ellipse.